Imagine setting sail into the icy, uncharted waters of the Arctic, filled with hope and the promise of glory, only to vanish without a trace. What secrets lie frozen in time? This is the haunting tale of the lost Franklin expedition. The year was 1845. Under the command of Sir John Franklin, two Royal Navy ships, the HMS Erebus and HMS Terror, embarked on a daring mission to find the fabled Northwest Passage, a sea route that could connect the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans through the Arctic. With 129 men, state-of-the-art ships reinforced for icy conditions, and provisions to last 3 years, the expedition was poised for success. But something went catastrophically wrong. By 1848, the ships were trapped in ice near King William Island, and the crew was never seen alive again. What happened to them? When Franklin's expedition failed to return, it wasn't immediately cause for concern. After all, Arctic voyages were notoriously unpredictable, and delays were common. But as the months turned into years, whispers of doubt turned into shouts of alarm. In 1848, the British Admiralty, facing mounting public pressure, launched a massive search effort. It was no ordinary search. It became the largest rescue operation of the 19th century, involving ships, sled teams, and even balloons to drop messages into the Arctic. Franklin's wife, Lady Jane Franklin, tirelessly campaigned for more resources, funding several expeditions herself and offering rewards for any information. Among the early searches was one led by James Clark Ross, who scoured the Arctic for signs of the missing men but returned empty-handed. Another expedition, led by John Ray in the 1850s, brought back the first tangible clues. Ray encountered Inuit hunters near King William Island who described a horrifying scene. Men, starving and exhausted, dragging sleds loaded with supplies. They told of corpses, abandoned camps, and something far darker, evidence of cannibalism among the crew. This revelation was met with disbelief and outrage back in Britain. How could officers of the Royal Navy, symbols of Victorian discipline and valor, succumb to such a fate? Yet Ray's findings couldn't be ignored. Alongside Inuit accounts, he brought back relics of the expedition: spoons, cutlery, and pieces of clothing traded by the Inuit who had stumbled upon the doomed crew's final camp. In 1854, Captain Francis Leopold McClintock finally uncovered the most haunting piece of evidence: a cairn containing a note scrawled by the surviving officers of the Franklin expedition. This note, dated April 1848, revealed that both ships had been trapped in ice for nearly 2 years. Sir John Franklin himself had died in June 1847, and the remaining men were abandoning the ships in a desperate bid for survival. McClintock's discoveries deepened the mystery. Why had the ships remained stuck in the ice for so long? Were the crews adequately prepared for such extreme conditions? And why had none of the survivors made it to safety, despite being just hundreds of miles from a known fur trading post? The search efforts became an obsession not just for Britain, but for adventurers and scientists worldwide. Over the decades, fragments of the story emerged: skeletons bearing signs of malnutrition and frostbite, abandoned lifeboats filled with bizarre items like books, silk handkerchiefs, and even fine china. Artifacts that spoke to a crew clinging to the remnants of civilization while their world descended into chaos. Yet, even with these findings, the full story of the Franklin expedition remained elusive. What could drive seasoned sailors and explorers to the brink of madness? What terrors did they face on the endless white horizon, with nothing but ice, snow, and the howling Arctic winds as their companions? As each piece of evidence surfaced, it painted a picture of desperation, resilience, and tragedy. It seemed that every answer only led to more questions, fueling the mythos surrounding the Franklin expedition, and solidifying its place as one of the greatest unsolved mysteries in history. For decades, the Franklin expedition's fate was pieced together from fragmented evidence, a mix of Inuit oral histories, recovered artifacts, and grim skeletal remains. Each discovery unveiled new layers of horror, mystery, and misjudgment. The Inuit, who had lived in the Arctic for generations, provided the first-hand accounts of the expedition's final days. They spoke of pale men walking aimlessly across the ice, dragging sleds laden with seemingly useless items, silverware, Bibles, and even curtain rods. Their actions defied logic. Why were these men hauling luxuries instead of life-saving tools or food? Inuit witnesses also described makeshift camps and abandoned lifeboats, some containing human remains. In one case, they discovered a boat loaded with over 70 pounds of chocolate, but no evidence that it had been eaten. These testimonies hinted at a crew battling not just the elements, but also the disorienting effects of hunger, cold, and possibly illness. One of the most shocking revelations came from the bones recovered near King William Island. British surgeon John Ray reported that many of these bones bore knife marks, evidence that the crew, driven to desperation, had resorted to cannibalism. The Victorian public, steeped in the era's rigid morality, rejected this idea outright. Prominent figures like Charles Dickens fiercely defended Franklin's honor, accusing Ray of maligning the reputation of British sailors. But in the years that followed, forensic analysis confirmed Ray's claims. Knife marks and tool imprints on bones indicated that, in their final, horrific hours, the men had no choice but to consume the flesh of their fallen comrades. The crew's erratic behavior might also have had a sinister medical cause. Modern analyses of bones and hair samples revealed alarmingly high levels of lead. The likely source? Their canned provisions. The expedition had relied on nearly 8,000 tins of food, an innovation at the time. Unfortunately, the cans were hastily produced, with poorly sealed lead solder that leached into the food. Lead poisoning can cause a host of symptoms: delirium, impaired judgment, and motor dysfunction, all of which could have contributed to the crew's downfall. This poisoning may explain their bizarre decisions: abandoning their fortified ships, carrying unnecessary items, and failing to adapt to their surroundings despite the Inuits' nearby presence. The very technology meant to safeguard them may have sealed their fate. Nature itself was an unyielding adversary. Arctic ice trapped the Erebus and Terror for 2 years, preventing any hope of escape. The ships were equipped with steam engines and reinforced hulls to withstand the ice, but the frozen landscape proved merciless. With no relief in sight, the men faced sub-zero temperatures, scurvy, and starvation. Survival required adaptability, a quality the Franklin expedition sorely lacked. Inuit techniques like building igloos, hunting seals, and using sled dogs could have saved them. Instead, the crew clung to British customs ill-suited for the Arctic, relying on dwindling rations and inadequate clothing. The artifacts left behind told a silent, tragic story. Forks and spoons engraved with officers' initials, boots too thin for Arctic weather, and journals with water-damaged pages hinted at the crew's desperate struggle to maintain order and dignity in the face of unimaginable hardship. One particularly poignant discovery was a note, penned in a shaky hand, declaring the abandonment of the ships. It listed the deaths of Franklin and others, but offered little else. Why did they abandon the ships when they were so well stocked? Why did none of the men reach safety? These questions lingered, defying easy answers. The clues uncovered by search teams painted a haunting picture of survival, sacrifice, and an expedition doomed by both human error and the unforgiving wilderness. But even as the story became clearer, the greatest mysteries remained frozen beneath the Arctic ice. In the early 2000s, Canada launched new expeditions to locate the wrecks of the HMS Erebus and HMS Terror. Using state-of-the-art sonar equipment, underwater drones, and even satellite imaging, search teams scoured the Arctic seabed. These efforts were guided not only by Inuit oral histories, but also by a renewed desire to claim this part of Canadian history and assert sovereignty over the Northwest Passage. The breakthrough came in 2014, when the HMS Erebus was discovered in the shallow waters of Queen Maud Gulf, lying just 36 feet beneath the surface. It was a breathtaking find. The wreck was astonishingly well preserved, with much of the hull intact. The ship's position suggested that it had drifted far from where it was abandoned, possibly carried by ice flows. 2 years later, in 2016, the HMS Terror was found in an equally remarkable state of preservation in Terror Bay. Unlike the Erebus, the Terror appeared to have been deliberately secured for winter, with its anchor lowered and hatches sealed. This contradicted earlier assumptions that both ships were hastily abandoned at the same time, raising new questions about the crew's decisions in their final days. The discovery of the ships opened a new chapter in the investigation. divers and archaeologists began exploring their interiors, uncovering a treasure trove of artifacts frozen in time. Inside the Erebus, they found officer cabins filled with personal belongings, plates, wine bottles, and navigational tools. The dining area still contained dishes, hinting at the daily routines of a crew trying to maintain normalcy amidst their ordeal. On the Terror, the conditions were even more striking. The ship's wheel, still in place, seemed ready to steer the vessel, while the lower decks held storage rooms and living quarters in near-pristine condition. Maps, charts, and logs were also recovered, raising hopes that these documents could reveal new insights into the expedition's fate. The role of the Inuit in solving the Franklin mystery cannot be overstated. Long dismissed by Victorian explorers, their oral histories proved invaluable. Many of the shipwreck locations had been described by Inuit elders for generations, including details about the movement of the ships and the final camps of the surviving crew. Inuit testimonies also highlighted the crew's failure to adapt to their environment. Instead of learning survival techniques from the locals, the Franklin men remained isolated, unable, or unwilling to step outside their rigid training. Despite these discoveries, some mysteries remain. Why were the ships abandoned when they still seemed seaworthy? Did illness, starvation, or despair lead the crew to their tragic decisions? The preserved wrecks offer tantalizing hints, but no definitive answers. Some speculate that a combination of lead poisoning, scurvy, and Arctic conditions pushed the crew into a downward spiral. Others suggest they might have believed they were closer to safety than they actually were, leading to disastrous choices. The rediscovery of the Erebus and Terror has reignited global fascination with the Franklin expedition. These ships are not just relics, they are time capsules, preserving a moment of Victorian ambition and its ultimate confrontation with nature's harshest extremes. As the icebound secrets of the Franklin expedition continue to emerge, one truth becomes clear. The story is as much about human ambition as it is about human frailty. The Franklin expedition was a product of its time, a reflection of Victorian Britain's unyielding confidence in its technology and imperial might. The Erebus and Terror were marvels of engineering, outfitted with steam engines, reinforced hulls, and an unprecedented stockpile of supplies. Yet none of this prepared the crew for the harsh realities of the Arctic. The expedition underestimated the environment and overestimated its ability to overcome it. This overconfidence blinded them to the adaptive wisdom of the Inuit, whose survival depended on their intimate knowledge of the land. The Franklin men clung to their British identity, prioritizing formalities like silver cutlery and uniforms over learning essential survival techniques. In the end, the frozen Arctic was indifferent to their bravery or their hubris. It claimed them, one by one, leaving behind only traces of their struggle. Beyond the physical challenges, the mental strain on the crew must have been unbearable. Trapped in unrelenting ice for 2 years, surrounded by a landscape of endless white, their world became a prison. Isolation and the slow realization that rescue might never come would have sown despair among even the most disciplined sailors. The rigid hierarchy of the Royal Navy, which valued obedience over adaptability, may have further hampered their ability to innovate and survive. The grim reality of dwindling rations, scurvy, and the haunting specter of cannibalism would have tested the men's humanity. How do you maintain hope in the face of such despair? For the Franklin crew, the answer seems to have been, they couldn't. Even in death, the Franklin expedition has not escaped the Arctic's grasp. The men who perished became part of the landscape, bones scattered across the ice, preserved in frozen time. The ships, swallowed by the ice, remained hidden for more than a century, their resting places shrouded in mystery. This story reminds us that exploration often comes at a steep cost. The Northwest Passage, the elusive prize the Franklin men sought, would eventually be mapped, but not by them. Their sacrifice contributed to our understanding of the Arctic, but it also serves as a cautionary tale about the limits of human ambition. The Franklin expedition's legacy endures as one of exploration's most tragic and compelling stories. It captures the allure of the unknown and the price we pay to conquer it. Today, the story resonates in new ways, as the Arctic becomes a focal point for climate change and geopolitical tension. The melting ice that revealed the wrecks of the Erebus and Terror serves as a stark reminder of how fragile humanity's place in the natural world truly is. The Franklin expedition was not just a journey to find a passage. It was a journey into the heart of human courage and vulnerability. It stands as a testament to both our insatiable curiosity and our vulnerability in the face of forces far greater than ourselves. What drives humanity to risk everything in pursuit of the unknown? Is it the promise of glory, the thirst for knowledge, or is it simply our nature to push the boundaries of the possible? The Franklin expedition may never answer these questions fully, but it leaves us with a haunting truth. The Arctic, in all its beauty and brutality, demands respect. Those who forget this do so at their peril. Today, the wrecks are protected as part of Canada's cultural heritage, with ongoing research ensuring the story continues to unfold. The Franklin expedition, once a tale of failure and loss, has become a symbol of human resilience, curiosity, and the enduring quest to uncover the unknown.